I have the great pleasure of introducing our next speaker, who is Puthiran Jeyapalsingham. He has been at the center since he was like this small. Grew up with the SSE groups. I had the great pleasure of teaching him or being the guru facilitator for the group 4. And then I had the even better pleasure of being in a class where he was teaching as a group 4 guru. And he's, as some of you might know, he's taking philosophy at school. And it's quite interesting to find him coming to class and taking a few quotes from his philosophy class and getting all these group 3 students, as well as myself, on our toes, trying to figure out the quote that he brought into class and trying to get us to, fully appreciate aspects of philosophy. I didn't know that group 3 was interested in philosophy, but so was I. So I was really blown away by that. So we see Puthi grow as a youth and now as a very accomplished adult, because I found out this week that he's written a book. I'm just going to read a little bit from the press release that came out with the book. It says, in his first book, Philosophy, so it's good, it's just his first book, A Path to Peace, Puthiran shows how philosophical concepts can guide readers on how to live a peaceful life. And he says, stress is big in our daily lives, like many lives, and many people seek to overcome this through a variety of other methods. But what if we simply change the way we look at situations in our lives? Puthiran applies teachings from the classroom setting, from Buddhism to Stoicism to life, and to provide readers with a fresh perspective on defining peace and simplifying the steps to achieve it. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Puthiran.
Sairam, everyone. So I'd just like to begin with a little story that I've heard once in one of my classes, and this story has stuck with me for quite some time. So the story is of a hunter who, when he was hunting, he was in the forest, hiding in the trees, hiding in the bushes. While he was hunting, he was looking for deer, as naturally hunters do in this time. While he was looking for deer, though, another arrow came from behind him and struck him. And once the arrow hit him, he had many questions going on in his mind. Right? Who shot the arrow? What is the arrow made out of? How did this person see me? I was hiding in the trees and the bushes. And he had all these questions running in his mind, but he left out the one important question that he had to have asked, and that was, how do I heal myself? So at that very moment, there could be many questions running through his mind, but there was one that remained the most important. And this is actually a Buddhist parable instructing us to focus on the important questions. So in life, we do have many questions running through our minds, but through these many questions, there remains one or two, maybe a few for some people, very important questions that we have to consider. And to me, the most important question to consider is, how am I supposed to live? Right? And the answer that I've based overall answer for that is to be at peace. So why do we care about peace at all? Right? What use is peace to us? Why does it matter? Many views on life has seen life as something negative, not something completely positive. Right? In Buddhism, life is suffering is the first noble truth provided in that. Other thinkers have suggested that life is an existential despair, an annihilating nothingness, nothing more than a curse that we have to overcome. So life has this pessimism to it. But not everyone accepts this pessimism, and that's the important thing to notice. If life is suffering, why don't we just accept it as it is and then go on with our lives? For some reason, we want to overcome this, and this is our search for peace. So whether you believe life to be suffering, a curse, despair, completely useless, an anxiety-filled existence, whatever you think of life as, there's always been that search for peace within humanity, in great cultures and societies. Humans have strived for peace throughout their lives. And we can just see examples of this. In ancient China, Ancient China, there was disasters, floods, chaos, disorder, disharmony. And then there came one figure who you may have heard of. His name was Confucius. And he's a very big figure. He shaped the nations in East Asia. His ideas and his ideas of life and education are what shape China, Japan, Korea, even South Asia to some extent. But Confucius, he looked at all these disasters and he didn't just accept them as it was. He knew that there had to be a reason for these disasters and, more importantly, a way we could overcome these disasters and disorder. Along with Confucius, a contemporary of his time, a man named Lao Tzu, or Lao Tzu, sometimes translated his name, he had the same idea. There had to be a reason for this disorder, and on top of that, there had to be a way that we could overcome this disharmony and disorder. And this isn't just in Asia. In ancient Greece, around the same time as Confucius and Lao Tzu, maybe a few hundred years after even, Greece was faced with a lot of wars and disasters and turmoils, just like China was. And from this, 4 distinct schools emerged in Greece. And all these schools, they all had one purpose, and that one purpose, peace. How can we get mankind to live a life of peace without worry? Right? People would look around, see their loved ones dying, seeing people go out to war and never coming back, see their country in turmoil, corrupt politicians. They would look at all this and see, what do I do? And that's why these schools emerged. And these schools' teachings, they still are very active today, and they're a big part of life, even. So it's inevitable. Peace is important. But here's a question, though. If we all search for peace innately, whether we realize it or not, if we all search for peace, why haven't we found it? Some people have. People like the Buddha, for instance. He sat under a tree, meditated, and attained enlightenment. He was at peace with himself. So why hasn't that happened to the rest of us? The biggest reason is that we are searching for the wrong thing when we search for peace. And to describe this, I'm going to introduce 2 things, 2 aspects of peace. Very simply named, temporary peace and lasting peace. Temporary peace is the peace that we all have the idea of. That's the one we all go for, the one we all search for. We think it to be the real peace. Right? This is the common desires that we might have. For instance, if I have this, I will be at peace. It's that mindset. It relies on external things, that we get this thing, we will be at peace. Now, the lasting peace, this could be referred to as enlightenment or inner peace. This is the true peace that once you have it, you won't be affected by the world and its events anymore. You won't be thrown out of your harmony with yourself. You won't be out of peace, to put simply. You will be at peace. Simplest answer of putting it. So that was all the introduction there. Now I'm just going to get right into the lasting peace. That's going to be the focus of this talk, lasting peace. And to give you an idea of what this is, I'm going to tell you a little story that I read in one of those magazines, the magazines that the Sai Centre sends out to the houses. And it's a story of a rich man. He is very rich, very successful, had a vast empire, a lot of wealth. He had everything. But for some reason, he wasn't at peace. So he decides to go over to a monk. And he heard this monk was at peace. And the monk could teach people how to be at peace. And this is what he needed. So what he did, he went over to the monk and posed a small question to him, or a small sentence, really. He told the monk, "I want peace." Now the monk gave him a very simple answer. He said, "Cut the I is the ego. Cut the want is desire. What are you left with? Peace." So the simple formula here is cut the ego, cut the desire, you have peace. However, this is much easier said than done. What is the ego that we cut? Is it just the I feeling? Quite simply, yes. The feeling that mankind is the most dominant species on earth. That's a form of ego. We think ourselves above everything else. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be above anything, just separate. That separation, thinking there's a me versus you, that is a form of ego as well. And that's the biggest form of ego that people often miss, often don't realize. We always are trained to see ego in that negative light. So the feeling of I being above. So that form of ego, quite easy to overcome. We just have to be humble. But the feeling of, or the ego that comes from me versus you, just the two separations, not necessarily an above position, just the two separations, that part of the ego, that's a little bit harder to overcome. The focus of this few minutes that I'm going to take right now, though, is going to not be on the ego, but on the second portion, desire. And the reason for this, I believe the ego and desire are connected, and from starting with desire, we can arrive at an egoless way. Now, what is the desire that we cut? We don't really see desires in our day-to-day lives. It's not on the front of our heads usually. But desires are everywhere in our lives, whether we realize it or not. It's what shape our lives. It's what moves us along. Right? The desire to improve, that helps technological advances. The desire to be healthy, medical advancements. The desire to know, to learn. All these are desires, even if they don't seem bad at first glance, right? The desire to be healthy, that doesn't seem bad at all. That seems good. But we'll look at that in just a bit. Desires in all shapes and forms are all bad, so to speak. And that includes desires of wanting things to be a certain way. Now, this desire is most often missed by people. The desire for things is easily noticed, right? I want a new car. I want a new phone. I want a new house. I want more money. I want good grades for students. These desires are easy to see. But the desire that a lot of people tend to miss is the desire for things to be a certain way. Expectations of things to be a certain way. For example, has anyone here ever gotten road rage when driving? Angry at another driver? Yeah, a few people. I get angry at this a lot. Especially, I like driving fast in the left lane. Someone else is driving slow, I'm angry right there. This is because we have a desire for things to be a certain way. We desire that other driver to follow the rules of the road, to drive a particular way. Or consider if someone else drives into taking a parking spot that we wanted. Right? We expected him not to. Right? There's nothing in that action of that person driving into the parking spot that causes us anger, right? Or else we'll be angry all the time because people are always driving into parking spots. So clearly it's not the fact that someone is driving into a parking spot that we're out of peace. It's because we have a desire in that particular aspect for things to be a certain way, again, for us. Right? That's that ego again, for us part. I'm saying us in the plural sense, but think me, my, singular form at the moment. Now, are all desires bad? That's the next question. We've seen that some desires are relatively bad. If we desire, for example, if we desire a car, right? If we desire a car, we might think, oh, once I get this car, I'll be at peace. Maybe for a little while, you'll be at peace. But once you get the car, you're going to want that car to be a certain way. You want that car to be well maintained. You might not want people to eat in the car because that will get crumbs on the floor. Right? You might not want people to brush by your car. You don't want it to be affected by the weather. All these little things, all these new desires will come about from that one desire. So those desires, we can see that those desires do have a negative connotation to them. But now what about the desire to love God, for example? Right? Or let's say someone has a desire to save all the animals on Earth. Or the desire to send people to Mars. Right? That's Elon Musk's things, if you've heard about him. He wants to send people to Mars. That doesn't seem like a bad desire. That seems good. Humans are advancing. Humans can explore new planets. And desiring to love God, what better thing could there be than loving God? Now, to answer this, I'm going to take the words of a 17th century Chinese sage. On the road of desire, do not happily dip your fingers into the pot just because it happens to be there. For once you have stuck your fingers in and tasted what is inside, you will want to put them in 10,000 fathoms deep. Now, first point here, 10,000 doesn't literally mean 10,000. In ancient China or in Chinese, when they speak of 10,000, they just mean a large number. For example, how many stars are in the sky? Oh, there's 10,000 stars. They don't literally mean 10,000, just a very large number. And that's what this is pointing at too here. Once you stick your fingers in, right, just a little bit, you stick your fingers into the jar of desire, you're going to want to put your whole hand in, and you're not going to want to take it out. And this goes for all desires. Because the very nature of desires is to beget more desires. And no matter how harmless a desire may seem, or how peaceful, innocent a desire may seem, they are all, by their very nature, going to bring about more desires. I remember hearing something in the center. Someone told the story. I believe, my memory might be a little bit hazy on this, but I believe the story was, Swami said that people out here in these places such as Canada, outside of India, farther away from the divine being itself, we're in a better position than those right there, right in India. Because when you're super close to him, the attachment grows. And that's the same for Rama and Krishna. People that were right there with him, they had a harder time when they passed away. So desires, they're not good. But then we run into a big problem. How do we get out of this state of desire? If desire is in our very nature of being, how do we get out of it? Right? We've already seen that desire for something good, desire to love God, we've already seen that that's not beneficial for us. What about the desire to be desireless? This is where people often fall into the trap, actually. They don't realize it, but they desire to be desireless. They want to be desireless because everyone says, oh, desire is bad. Don't desire anything. Buddha's third noble truth, the way to cease your suffering is to detach. But this is the problem. See, people desire to be desireless. And as we know from desire, this is only going to bring about more desires. Consider this. If someone is coming by and giving you free apples, would you say, no, I'm practicing detachment, no thank you? Or if someone is coming by giving you anything, free phones, free pens, would you just say no and just push it all aside? It might seem good, but you've missed one crucial point. You're attached to that detachment idea. So you're not really detaching in this mindset. So how do we get out of this? This is, to me, when I first learned about this was a big problem for me. How can we get out of this? I mean, is there any way to get out of it even? That brings me to my next point. The answer for getting out of this is just being. Not being, B-E-I-N-G, but B-E with a hyphen, I-N-G. Being. When we are in a state of being, we're not wanting anything. We're not going after anything. We're letting life flow along on its own accord. The best way that I can put this is in an analogy, the analogy of a river. Yeah, so some of my Group 3 students are here. They've heard this before. When we're on a river, when you're first on a river, you might try to swim against the current. Right? When you're in the river, you want to get out of it. You try to swim against the current, try to grab onto the rocks that are hanging there to not let yourself be pulled across by it. That's natural. That happens. But that in its very nature is desire. We're desiring to swim against the current, trying to pull our way against the current, trying to hold on to things in the current. Once you open up to the idea of detachment, this is more so along the lines of going with that current. Right? We don't force anything along. We don't try to do anything. We just simply be. Now, most people, when they first hear this, they think, oh, but if I'm just being, what am I doing? Am I not thinking about anything? Am I going to move at all? Am I going to float like aimlessly in space? The idea here isn't when you're in a state of being, you're not, again, pulling yourself out of the world. Right? Again, that's an attachment to being. And we don't want that. I mean, even saying just be is a form of attachment. In this perfect state of being. There is no words to describe it, for we can't. In Exodus 3:14 in the Holy Bible, God asked Moses, God has told Moses to go free some slaves, and Moses asked God, who should I say has sent me? And God says to Moses, I am that I am. He doesn't say, I am God, your Lord, your Savior, the all-powerful being. He just says, I am that I am. There's no predicate attached. Once you attach a predicate, you've dipped into the jar of desire, so to speak. And that's what we want to avoid.
Being awareness bliss, it's exactly the same, right? Like you use different words, but it means the same thing. It's being aware, aware that you are, and simple awareness that being is being, right? Like I am that I am, aware that I am.
Exactly, yeah.
It creates a feeling of bliss, of flow with life, like a droplet of water in a river, right? Like
Exactly.
it's already happening.
Exactly, yeah. Basically, life is going to happen no matter what. We don't have to act to make life happen. We don't have to do anything to make life happen. Life already has a plan for us. It's in the very nature of being human, of being alive on this very earth. We're not randomly placed on this earth, right? We are creatures that grow out of the earth. You won't be surprised to find, or you would be surprised, sorry, to see a banana on an apple tree, right? Because an apple tree doesn't grow bananas, it grows apples. Humans are the apple of Earth. Consider Earth as our big tree. The Earth grows organisms the same way the apple tree grows apples. So humans were made for this Earth. We are made out of this Earth. And as everything in Earth, as everything on nature, it flows in its natural way. Trees don't do anything. They don't actively go out and do anything. They can't, first of all, but they don't have to either. Right? And trees, they're still perfectly fine. Nature is beauty and harmony. If you've ever walked through a forest, you'll see nature in its perfect state. No contention, no arguments, no anything. It's just the natural being of everything, of nature, of all the animals. When they're hungry, they eat. When they're tired, they sleep. But they don't do anything beyond what they need to, what they have to. So that's the nature of just being. It's a complicated point to kind of grasp right there. But there's this one quote from an ancient philosopher named Heraclitus who said, listen not to me, but the Logos. Just pull away for a sec. Logos, just to think of this as Brahman in Hindu sense, or God, if you want to think of the Abrahamic traditions. It's the all-pervading force, something greater than humanity. So Heraclitus says, listen not to me, but the Logos, and you will see that all things are one. Meaning human speech can't really describe this. If I say, oh, we're one with the universe, and we just look at each other and say, oh, no, you're you, I'm me. We can see the difference right here. I'm me, the dog is there, that's a dog. This is a building, I'm not the building. When we rationalize it like that, we won't get to it. So that's why you don't listen to human speech. Don't listen to this rationality. Just notice the being of as it is. So one final point that I want to mention before I finish off. And this comes from a little quote that I got from a TV show. Now, this quote, it's related to happiness, but we can consider it in the same lines of peace. And two characters are talking, and they ask, if you could give happiness a shape, what would you give it? And after some consideration, one person said, I would give happiness the shape of glass. Can any of you think why that is? Why glass? Because it shines? Transparent? Yeah, those are on the right ideas. He explains why he chose glass as well, and it's on those ideas. Even if we don't see it, the glass is always there. We just have to change our point of view slightly, and then it will shimmer and shine, and we will be able to see it in its full glory. But if we look at it in a particular way, we might not see the glass, right? We'll see right through it in its transparency. When you look at it from an angle, though, you'll see the light shining, and you'll notice it there. And peace, it's the very same thing with peace. It's always there. It is there for us. That's the very nature of peace, of inner peace. of lasting peace. Its nature is to be there in humanity as it is. All we have to do is change our mindset of looking at something, change your viewpoint of life. When Buddha sat under the tree and meditated and received enlightenment, nothing changed. No one walked by and gave him a piece of paper and said, oh, look, here's a secret to peace. No one gave him a certain food that he ate and suddenly became enlightened. No one gave him money or cars or anything. See, that's the difference. Going back to that very first point I made, or the second point maybe, the difference between temporary peace and lasting peace. Temporary peace relies on that external thing. And just as anything external is going to come and go, so too will our peace if it relies on that external thing. Inner peace, lasting peace, comes from within. That's the very nature of inner peace. It's in the name, inner, within. It's within us. So nothing out here will change, but everything in here or in here, that will change. The way you look at life, the way you see things. If you see life and death to be mere games of the cosmos, if you understand that all things that are born, they must die, if you understand that everything that happens is a work of the universe, a work of a higher power, if you stop putting yourself in every situation, thinking this is happening to me, the ego there again, if this is happening to me, peace will go away if you keep putting yourself in that. There's a little bookmark outside that says surrender on it, Swami's bookmark. On the back of that bookmark, Swami says, why are you so troubled? Leave it all to me. This is all his plan, Swami's plan, nature's plan, universe's plan, the flow of Brahman, whatever word you want to call it. It's all for a reason. Now this might not be acceptable just by rationally determining it, right? You might say, oh, it's all for a reason. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. We don't have to figure it out at all. We just have to understand that all that's happening, it's happening for a purpose. That's all we have to understand. We might not understand it at first. There's a famous quote, this is an important quote. My first quote I actually heard from this one particular figure, a 19th century Danish philosopher, Søren Kierkegaard. He tells us life must be lived forwards, but it can only be understood backwards. Meaning, you only see life and understand why things happen the way they do in hindsight. But while you're living in it, you won't be able to find a purpose for it, no matter how hard you look. Even if you might think you see the purpose, right? Oh, I did well in this particular thing. This must mean this is what I have to do in life. At face value, sure, perhaps. But you've exerted something onto it. You've exerted your own thoughts onto that thing. And that's when you start to fail, so to speak. True acceptance of life, acceptance of peace, letting this peace overflow within you. Getting this to happen is diminishing your ego, diminishing your desires, eventually ceasing them to be, but not even trying to cease them to be. It's do or do not, as Yoda would say. We just have to let it be. It seems very redundant just to repeat it over and over again. Just let it be, let it be, let it be. But that's the way life is. Just let life happen on its own. Life will happen. Life naturally will happen. Right? Plants will grow, people will be born, people will die, animals will be born and animals will die. Fruit will become ready to be eaten, ripe. Things will happen in life. Life is going to go on. We don't have to do anything. Life will put us in the situations that we need to be in. Every little situation, even if it seems like it's something crazy, something we can't even make sense of, it's for a purpose. That's the nature of life. Everything happens for a purpose. It's all, you can think too, everything happens, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. You just have to understand life in a certain different way. Whether this cause and effect thing is something you want to accept, or anything about life. Just looking at life in that different direction, in that different angle, in that different viewpoint, that's what will give us inner peace. Because it all comes from us, nothing from external. That's the most important thing, if anything, in this little talk here. The most important thing that I want to just end with, we all have the capacity for peace within us. There is no external thing that might help you. Maybe some knowledge might help you, but that's it. But at the end of the day, no matter how much knowledge you pile on, true peace will only come when you let go of everything, when you just be in the world as you are meant to be. Thank you for your time. Sai Ram. And if there are any questions, I can try to answer. Shanti Aunty? Sure, yeah.
Maybe I'm not knowledgeable enough to do that, but it's something which is not practical. That's the way how I see it.
Yeah.
You could explain or enlighten.
Sure, yeah.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, so
I'm really salute to you.
yeah, thank you for the compliments. But the Chinese have a concept that they call Wu Wei. Wu Wei translates to effortless action, action without action, doing without doing. This is the idea of the things that you have, the responsibilities that you have, those are part of the ordered universe, you can kind of say, or it's part of the plan for you. So the responsibilities that you have, if you just be, that doesn't mean go into a forest and just be there. That's an attachment to being. If you're just being, you're not really thinking about it, but at the same time you are, because we can't just not think about anything and live that way. If we're not thinking when we're driving, we're going to get into a car accident, right? So we have responsibilities, yes. And those responsibilities are a part of the natural action for us. So when I said life will happen no matter what, we will be put in certain positions. For instance, we might do bad in our science classes, and that might make us take up a new field of study in school. And that would just be accepting the being there. Or for instance, we might do well in, let's say, our science classes, and that might be our natural way to be. So it's not a matter of when we don't be, we pull away from everything in the world. It's we accept what happens and see what doors open and how we can go on with life in that way. Does that make sense? Yeah, no, that's perfect. Or Rani Aunty?
That's all nice. Like, once it has happened, to accept and go on, just let it go is easier than when you come to a juncture. Everyone comes to a juncture, needs to make a decision, go this way or that way. At that point, how would you let it just flow?
So that's a good question. I've actually wrestled with this multiple times, especially because I'm at that stage now. Do I get a job and make something out of myself there, or do I just go pursue philosophy? Right. So I'm at that juncture. So yeah.
And what would motivate us? Like this flow thing and this decision making,
Yeah.
the free will that we are told we are given. So
Yeah. So there's an old video that I saw. It's from a philosopher, Alan Watts. He's well versed in Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. He's well versed in the religious side of life as well. And he gives an example. He asks, what would you do if money was no object? So this takes a bit of meditation. What do you really want to do with your life? Not, I want to do this for this, not, instrumentally. What would you do intrinsically? What do you want to do? What gives your life happiness and joy and meaning? What makes you feel excited even? Or what makes you enjoy life? And then Alan Watts said, do that. Don't do the thing that will get you the most money. Don't do the thing that you do for the external thing. Don't do things as means to an end, so to speak. So when you're at that juncture, do the thing that's an end in itself. Even if you're going to live a short life from it, at least you lived a short life doing something you loved. Is how he looks at life. But
There's a saying like follow your passion, right?
yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Follow your
Passion. Follow your heart. Follow what you want to do. Really. Yeah.
But as Anupam was saying, we sometimes forget, we always repeat and always forget that omnipresence, omnipotence, like omnisciency and of the divine being. Like he's in whatever you decide, right? It is, you're kind of, we are doing this, like we learn that, we accept it, but we don't realize it in fullness, right? Like just imagine this space in this hall. This is the absolute being, right? But absolute being comes in form, right? And it's all of us. And it will be, since the moment it takes the form of a little child, it will be conditioned perfectly to the point of crossing when you have to make a decision. Let's say just that one moment in life. And whatever decision you make, it's going to be the decision for
we
you.
don't know what the other path is, right? Because we never took the other path at that point in the junction.
But that is life. It's trust and faith.
Yeah, it's
So
yeah.
it's a journey of trust and faith. You get up early in the morning, you get out of the house, whether you believe in God or not, you're hoping on Lord, this better go good for me, right? You sit in the car, you have to have this trust and faith for the life journey.
It's hard to reach the destiny.
And and it's not hard to reach. It's just we never look honestly, right? Like, and we learn these things, and there are things on the paper. Like we sing bhajan every Sunday, like your own names and every form. Who are we talking about, right? We are talking about all of you. All of you are him. Like there is nobody else. God doesn't create and then leaves the children alone, right? Like take care of yourself and come back to me later on. It's all of you. Whatever problem, it is him creating the problem, him giving the solution. That's his journey. That's his play. That's why it's called Lila. Right? So.
Abhijit, you wanted to ask something?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Just based on all of this, how do you distinguish between complacency and being? Like, as Shanti was saying, like letting things happen, letting it flow, but at what point do you actually have to start doing something?
Or,
You were saying like
yeah.
if you do well in a science test, you accept it, or if you do poorly, you accept it and maybe move into something else. But what if you were supposed to actually persevere, push through? Because if you were complacent about everything, there would be no advancement. There would be
Right.
you just stay where it is. There
Exactly.
wouldn't be any improvement.
Yeah, so this, again, you can obviously look at this in multiple different ways. For one thing, some people might say, oh yeah, we don't need improvement at all. We just have to accept the way our things are going to be, and we're going to be put in a position where we can improve ourselves, and that position is going to be best for the world. But also keep in mind, everyone here is going to have different experiences, right? So everyone is going to, some people might be in that mindset of going after what they want no matter what. And then, again, so this might seem a little bit too mystical, but everything has a place in the universe, including each and every individual. And the very fact that everyone is here today, it's a part of a great order. That's my belief anyway. So you individually, let's say, for instance, you do poorly on a test. Let's say your mindset is to persevere and do well. So you might study even harder for next time and then conquer that test and then continue on your path that way. Right? It's no accident that you were put in a certain lifestyle that made you get that mindset, right? Where if you have someone else who's in that mindset of just kind of letting it more relaxed, they don't want to persevere in the sciences or whatever thing they do bad at, they'll flow into a different path. So we don't think of each. So it's weird because I talked about ego instead of seeing everyone's as different, but in the same time we are put in different positions as per karma, for one thing. We all have different experiences that shape us all differently, and that will put us in a certain way of how we interpret certain things. But at the end of it all, we are all doing the being. Right? In that state of being, we're all doing something. So in the state of being for, let's say, a student, he's going to be studying. That's what it is to be a student. Some students may not study. They're not being. But then whereas a student who will persevere, who will go through all his failures, that type of student, he's only that student because of what he experienced. And does that make sense?
To use the analogy of the river, who are you asking from what point of view are you asking? From a point of view of a river or a space of this small, or a point of view of a single drop of water within the river that is worried about its own being, separate from the totality of river, right? If you're asking from the point of view of separate from the totality of the river that flows regardless of what, if you assume that identity and you only know that identity, then you have every reason to worry about it. And your dilemma is real. But if you also, at the same time as you live the life of a droplet of water, if you know the totality of river that is inherent in you, then you don't have, you can live both at the same time, right? Like you can sort of know, have trust and faith that whatever happens with the droplet, it's in the greater flow of the river, right? Like you won't have a worry about that identity that is we call sometimes ego, right? Like it is normal. Everybody assumes it, right? Like as you because of the sense organ within display, it is obvious to you that like I'm separate from him. But within yourself, you can find that consciousness, that being that is all of this. And you know that whether you're Peter, you're Jane, you're Stephen, it doesn't matter. You know that consciousness is within everybody. And as you know, and you are conditioned to that point by your mother and father, which is also the totality of the universe, to behave certain way, to make a decision this way or that way. Like when somebody asks you, you like tea or coffee, it just comes out. You don't have to think, right? Because all of your experiences brought you to that, all of the conditioning brought you to that point whether you say, no, I don't like to drink anything right now, or yes, I like. That is the divine play, and only He's playing it. Like that's what we mean when we say there's no you, there's no me, there's only one being. But we forget the totality all the time. You know, like they come and give you the clean slate, your fire, and gold. Where did it come from? There's no person there standing in you. This is all the totality giving you the clean slate to be able to give you something else the next couple of days, months, years. You know, you're going to write a book, become. But you cannot see it at that point of time. And that's what worries the small droplet. But it doesn't worry the totality of the river. So, and that is the spiritual path. To see that you're not only the droplet, that you're the totality of the river. And you cannot, nobody can give you that. We can say, no guru can give you that. Only the inner guru, that is the same guru that is the only one. Only one God, right? Does that help? Okay?
Deepalianti, you wanted to?
I don't know like this is correct, but from what I've been hearing, from what you say is, I guess depending on where we are in life, we have to basically put in our best effort and not think of the results. Because once you dedicate the result to him, he knows what is best. For example, like just talking about in terms of a student who
Yeah, that would be the yeah. Yeah.
Whatever happens, take it. So like we put in whatever that thought at the time, we take a path, and then be it. Just let it go.
Just basically do what you want. Your heart knows best, but don't rethink too much. That's the problem. If you just sit down, meditate, quiet, and clean your mind, empty your mind, don't think about, I don't know, a TV show that's coming on later that day, or don't think about what you have to eat later that day. Just empty your mind, just think, what do you want to do? What happens to you, right? As a mother, you might, again, have something, a different sense of what you want to do than me, a student, at the moment, right? And then individually will differ as well. Yeah. Uncle, did you?
So you have two students going home from school, and I don't know, teacher tells him, okay, give your mother, you know, like I have no preparation, like read those lines from this to that. So two students are going home, and one is, you know, going home, walking, thinking home, oh, I have to give it to my mother. This is the best I can do, right? And I really respect her, love her, and the second student, he goes and takes the note to his mother. The second one also goes, but he crosses the bridge and throws the note into the river. At that moment, for that person, that is 100% that he can do it, right? It's from our point of view, it can be good, it can be bad, right? But for that person, at that moment, he's brought up to be at that moment, have that much awareness, right? This is what he can do. He cannot do what the other guy is doing because he's not conditioned or brought up to behave in that kind of way. You know, we can disapprove of that, of course, but that is the 100% for that person that right? And it is all strongly good, right? Regardless of how judgmental our mind is about that right now.
That was a fantastic one. Give him a big hand. I was also guru to Puthi. I know how challenging kid he was in the class. And I see him today talking about peace. Amazing. Really is great. He's really great. And if he's making us to introspect and analyze so much, he has gone in depth. Great. I'm sure you are going to go heights. So I would like to give a small token of appreciation.